It's that time of the week when former football and sports stars share their stories, plus the Next Man Up segment featuring news and notes from around the world of Major League Football. It happens all right here, right now, on Thursday Night Tailgate, with your hosts, Chris-Mascaro and Bob-Lazzari. Guys, enjoy the guests. Have some fun. Take it away.
Hey, thank you, Joe Lodgen. Good evening, everybody, and thanks for joining us again tonight on Thursday Night Tailgate, your home of the NFL Alumni Association and the Gridiron Greats. TNT is brought to you by the great folks over at Kyvan Foods, Coastal Orthopedics, the Louisville Slugger Museum and Factory, and the French Lick Resort. I'm your host, Chris Mascaro, and tonight my co-host, Bob-Lazzari, and I have 5 more great guests that we are looking forward to sharing with you over the next couple of hours. Typically, we would start with our weekly Next Man Up segment with Major League Football. Today, they announced some delays with the start of their inaugural season. Their VP of Communications, Nick Athan, will join us next week to kind of take us through all of the details. So instead, tonight in our first segment, we're going to have the Dean of Atlanta Sports Talk Radio, Mr. Beau Bock. Beau has become a great friend of the show, so we look forward to talking with him to see, get his thoughts on what's going on with the Atlanta Falcons, the University of Georgia, maybe a prediction about the Atlanta Braves as we look forward to opening day next week. So Beau is going to be along with us about 15 minutes from now. Following him, while Tony Collins is off enjoying himself in the Bahamas, where apparently they don't have phones, so he couldn't join us tonight in his regular time slot. Tonight, we're going back, back-to-back guests who were top 10 picks in the 1989 draft, who obviously had a great deal of hype and a lot of promise, but substance abuse sabotaged both of their careers. First guy is going to be TNT Hall of Famer and former University of Georgia, Pittsburgh Steelers, and Chicago Bears running back Tim Worley. We'll catch up with Tim and hear his story, about a half an hour or so from now. The second guy is former Michigan State, Green Bay Packers, and Indianapolis Colts offensive lineman Tony Mandarich. So both guys, have remarkable stories to tell. Tim has shared his story with us several times. We'll get him to update us on the great work that he is doing now, plus, a little bit about his past for those who haven't heard the story before. But it's going to be Tony's first appearance with us, and I think many people believe they know his story. Well, tonight you're going to get to hear him tell it firsthand. What happened, what derailed his playing career. So Tony will join us a little bit later in this hour to so we can share, see the story through his eyes. We'll kick off hour number 2 with another TNT Hall of Famer, and that's Steelers legend Rocky Bleier. I'm not sure there's a better storyteller anywhere on the planet than Rocky. So we'll hear more about his amazing career. Plus, we'll get his thoughts on Martavis Bryant's suspension, how that compares, if at all, to what he saw back in the 70s with Joe Gilliam, who was a young, promising quarterback who had his share of issues with substance abuse. So we'll talk a lot about that. Plus, get Rocky to give us his thoughts on the Steelers and what they're doing this offseason, project into next season as well. So we look forward to catching up with Rocky a little over an hour from now. And then we'll wrap up the show with former Vikings Pro Bowl defensive tackle and current Tennessee Titans defensive assistant coach Keith Millard. Keith was an absolute sack machine back in 1989. Now he's teaching his players how to do the same. The Titans led the league in sacks last season. So we look forward to talking with Keith about 90 minutes from now. So we got another great show in store for you tonight. So sit back, relax. Let us take your mind off everything else going on in your life for the next couple of hours. But let's start things off by going up to Eastern Connecticut, the home of my co-host, Mr. Bob-Lazzari. Bob, how are you tonight, my friend?
I'm well, Chris. How are you, sir?
I'm feeling really good tonight, Bob. As we were talking off air, it's always, such a crazy weather pattern for you guys up in Eastern Connecticut, whether it's freezing cold temperatures, record temperatures that you guys saw this winter to, warm temperatures coming out of nowhere. Now hurricane force winds up there tonight. Always a mixed bag for you guys.
Total soap opera. Today's chapter, Chris, came out of nowhere. I mean, they were talking breezy. Now, breezy in New England can mean anywhere from 10 miles per hour to 50. Today was close. Today was 50 and above. It was crazy, Chris. It was. We had a day like this a couple days ago, but it was about 35 out. Today it was 65 out with double the force winds. I mean, there's trees bent over, people just covering their eyes to keep sand out of their eyes. It was quite the day up here, and March went out with a bang, as I told you off the air. So April, they're saying possibly snow early next week. So
Is that right?
again, people laugh when I say we're not safe till May here, but it truly is the truth.
No kidding. Unbelievable the things that you guys go through up there on a week-to-week basis. Bob, I want to start our show off here. Get a couple of quick thoughts from you before we get too far in. I want to go a little homer on you because this week ESPN's Jeremy Fowler wrote an article about Ben Roethlisberger belonging, amongst the best quarterbacks in the league. And by best, he's talking about, top two-ish. So curious to get your thoughts. The top quarterbacks, we typically, we talk about it on the show all the time, right? You start any list about top quarterbacks, active in the league right now, and that's, with Tom Brady. Peyton Manning would have been in the discussion for many years. Obviously, he's recently announced his retirement. Aaron Rodgers, certainly, one of the best quarterbacks in the game. Drew Brees, another guy we talk an awful lot about. But Ben, typically was considered second-tier quarterbacks amongst guys, like the Eli Mannings and Phillip Rivers, guys that came into the league with. Those are sort of the guys you get to next. But Bob, I'm curious to get your thoughts when you think about right now the top five quarterbacks around the league. Is Roethlisberger amongst that top five?
You make a great point, Chris. Those guys you had mentioned just now, it seems like when a guy like Roethlisberger doesn't get the props because he's more of a blue collar in a blue collar town. Guys like Breeze and of course up here it's all Brady, but you can't argue with a guy like Roethlisberger's record. I mean, this is a guy, his won and loss record speaks for itself, but this is a guy that's probably about 5 years has thrown for over 4,000 yards. I don't always like that argument, Chris, as you know, the best at this, the best at that.
Right.
It has so much to do with the kind of system you're in, the kind of personnel you're surrounded with. We know a guy like Roethlisberger lost Bell this last year. It has so much to do with the time at hand, but you have to kind of put him in the equation. I don't see how you can't. And this guy has been incredibly durable for 12 years. They're thinking he has 3 or 4 good ones left. And if that's the case, Chris, he'll probably be close to 55,000 yards passing. I mean, that's up there in the Hall of Fame territory. So you can't argue with what he's done. And, again, his touchdown interception ratio is very high, too. I can't argue with he's one of the top ones out there. You can't.
Yeah, and obviously, being a Steelers fan, I certainly think he's amongst the elite. But as you mentioned a moment ago, Bob, you project forward a few years, right? And he gets into the, mid 50s, 55,000 yards, as you say, passing yards in his career. He's got a really good touchdown to interception ratio, 2 rings, been to 3 Super Bowls. Is he a guy you think is destined for the Hall of Fame? Is he Hall of Fame material? Yeah,
I think. Like you said, if you're above 50,000, Chris, with a couple rings and you get there a few times, I mean, that's kind of automatic. But let's hope. Hopefully he goes out on a good note. As you know, being a big Steelers fan, he's taking his licks. He plays hurt. But he's 30. I think he's going to be 30. He just turned 34, I think, Chris. So, as you get into the mid-30s, you just don't recover like you did 6-7 years ago. So let's hopefully he keeps up with the Iron Man quality that he has. I think if that happens, you're 2020, you're talking him in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, and when I think about, Bob, that who are the top 5 quarterbacks in the league, to your point, I mean, it's, Brady always starts that list off for me. I think Aaron Rodgers is probably 2 when he's got the weapons around him and he hasn't had them, due to injuries and other reasons, probably for the last couple of years. I think Roethlisberger fits in there really nicely at 3. I think Drew Brees still is among that list. Carson Palmer still probably belongs on that list, and I like the top 3 because they are that good, right? Brady is Brady, and there's no debate. He's the best. The guy wills them just so many victories. Even when you can't name, who his wide receivers are, he's still able to win and throw for over 300 yards. Aaron Rodgers, can sometimes hurt you with his legs on top of the fact he's got such a great arm. He's so good that, they, brought back James Jones this last season, right, Bob? A guy that got cut by the Raiders and the Giants. You can't play here. You're not good enough. Green Bay brings him back in when Jordy Nelson gets hurt, and Rodgers makes, him successful and have a great year. But Roethlisberger, he's made himself into a great passer. We know how hard he is to get on the ground and how he extends plays so well. And those are things that guys like Drew Brees and Carson Palmer can't do. So I definitely think he's in the top 3 quarterbacks in the league. So, it's going to be interesting, as you say, once, he gets 5 years removed from his playing days, how he is remembered and how quickly, if he's, considered to be a Hall of Famer. I think he is a Hall of Famer. I think he's going to have the numbers. He's already got the rings, knock on wood, hopefully he stays healthy and can bring another one, get the Steelers their 7th ring that that we're looking for. So, but it'll be interesting to see how he finishes out his career.
And
Bob,
I think the Steelers. I also think, Chris, that the Steelers think it's the time is now too. They're going to try to surround him right now. They're not going to wait till he's 36, 37. The time is now to see if they can get that ring within the next couple years. And let's face it, they'll have a better chance in the next 2 years than they would maybe in the next 4 or 5 if he's still at the helm.
Right. Bob, the other thing I wanted to get your thoughts on, and speaking of quarterbacks, and you mentioned this last week regarding the Broncos and their signing of Mark Sanchez. They've been talking with San Francisco about potentially, trading for Colin Kaepernick. Some have written that deal is being held up right now because they want him to take a bit of a pay cut. But how comfortable would you be if you're John Elway right now, Bob, or a Broncos fan, that, going into next season, what you've got, on your roster right now is Mark Sanchez as the starter, and maybe you get somebody in the draft or you sign a journeyman quarterback to be the backup. But how secure are you feeling thinking that Mark Sanchez could be your starting quarterback?
Very, very uncomfortable. When they signed him, Chris, I was under the impression that they signed him as a backup, and either they were going to make a decision on Osweiler or go out and get one of the names out there, your RG3s, your Kaepernick, whoever they think might fit into this system. The guy that I thought was going to fit into that system, the guy most like Peyton Manning, was a guy like Fitzpatrick. Now, Fitzpatrick's not a great quarterback, but I think he was the type of quarterback who could fit into that system and piggyback on that defense and at least get them to the postseason. Sanchez, to me, is a backup, Chris. When you think about it, he hasn't played regularly since 2012. And in 2012, Chris, he threw 13 TDs and 18 picks. I remember well because the Jet fans were on him all the time. So it wasn't pretty. And so he hasn't played regularly since 2012. Guy's been in the league 7 years. You would think by now that this guy is either a bona fide starter or a backup. But I just think the Broncos just got kind of thrown off there, Chris, when they signed him, and Osweiler all of a sudden just boom, and they're left with this guy. And now with Fitzpatrick wanting all the money, they were kind of it just didn't work out for Denver. So I don't know what they're doing now. They would have to change their entire kind of offense if they were to get a guy. Well, can't get RG3. If Kaepernick ever ended up in Denver, it's not that kind of offense in Denver, Chris. It's always been based on the Peyton Manning type thing, at least over the last few years. Sanchez, somewhere in between, but not enough talent to you have to have more talent at the quarterback position, even with a great defense, to win. He's not even one of those guys I would call your field general leaders type that can just direct the offense. So I don't know where they stand. To me, he is the number 2 quarterback there, and they don't have a number 1.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly right. And I'm 100% with you, Bob. I thought Fitzpatrick was a good short term, gap filling kind of quarterback that could get them through the next couple of years potentially. To your point, Peyton Manning, we know in this last season wasn't the guy that we had watched for so many years. But Fitzpatrick, obviously a smart quarterback, a guy that can come in there and be steady, a guy that you could say to him, don't we talk about all the time, right? The field manager, hey, game manager, don't lose the game for us. We got a great defense, right? So let's be a little bit conservative. Let's use the running game a little bit more. Now they've lost Anderson to free agency, but if you could build the running game, and how I feel about still winning the old fashioned way, right? You run the ball really well. You play really good defense. We saw them do that in the Super Bowl. So he would be the guy that you would want to come in there, can pass the ball pretty well. And could lead them. And, Bob, to your point a moment ago about when you were talking about Roethlisberger, the time is now in Denver, right? You've got this great defense. You've just won a Super Bowl. You want to continue to capitalize on that. And, the window for these things is so small, right? Mm-hmm. So, bring in a guy like Fitzpatrick, let him be the quarterback. And, to your point, Sanchez could be a nice number 2 in case, Fitzpatrick were to get hurt. That seems like the right way to go. I agree with you. Fitzpatrick is not a $20 million quarterback. And, there's so many, guys now want this $20 million. And the fact that Brock Osweiler just signed for all that money is certainly going to say, well, the market must say that a guy like that is worth $20 million. So why isn't Fitzpatrick worth $20 million if he is, right, outside of age being a factor? So it's going to be interesting to see what they decide to do if they're able to bring in a Kaepernick. But to your point, Kaepernick isn't the prototypical drop back quarterback that Fitzpatrick is. So it'll be interesting to see if that were to come to fruition, do they adapt their offense a little bit to fit Kaepernick's skills versus what they had with Peyton Manning, which was obviously not a guy that gets in the pistol and does a hybrid for being a running quarterback and a throwing quarterback. Interesting to see where Denver goes because again, the Denver Broncos, being the defending champions, you would think they would want to build off that momentum and what they've got going on, at least for another couple of seasons. I'm with you, Bob. Mark Sanchez isn't the guy that's going to get you there.
No, the irony of it all, Chris, Elway, the man in charge there, a Hall of Fame quarterback. And I think, again, they just got caught in the middle of a very tough situation. But believe me, the end of the Sanchez era in New York was terrible. It was just, when is he going to make the bad mistake to make us lose the game? You just don't want that kind of guy in Denver, even with a great defense. And as you said, the time for dominance these days in all sports is not that long. Look at the Kansas City Royals, Chris. I'm reading reviews right now. They're not picked very high. It's the team that that went to the series a few years in a row. So again. Denver, you don't want them to see him go down that road. They want to keep building, at least stay in the postseason. I don't see with Sanchez them doing it with him.
Right. No, I certainly 100% agree with you there, Bob. Be sure to follow Bob's column in New York Sports Day, as well as his show Monday Night Sports Talk that he does along with the very talented Tony D'Angelo, both the column and the show. Fantastic, folks. All right, everyone, like we do here every week on Thursday Night Tailgate, we want to send out a big hello and an even bigger thank you to our military personnel listening in around the world on the Armed Forces Radio Network. We want to thank all of you for listening and for doing what you do to protect all of us every day. We appreciate you so very much. For everyone else listening in, we thank you as well, and we hope you'll join us in saying thank you to our brave men and women serving to protect our freedoms around the world. If you happen to see a member of the military out and about, in the airport, on the street, in a restaurant, please stop for a moment and tell them thank you. They are our real heroes. We also want to thank our veterans for your service and the sacrifices that you and your families have made for us over the years. A big thank you as well to Sean Cruz and the wonderful folks over at the Armed Forces Radio Network. It is such an honor for us to have Thursday Night Tailgate be a part of your network. You can find us by going to armedforcesradionetwork.org. And veterans, please continue to check out globalvoiceforveterans.org, a wonderful site with news and articles that are specifically geared towards you. You're going to find those articles interesting and beneficial for you. Again, globalvoiceforveterans.org. Check it out. TNT is brought to you by the great folks over at Kyvan Foods, owned and operated by our good friend, former Falcons and Bengals tight end and TNT Hall of Famer Reggie Kelly. If you want to be king of the grill this summer, folks, it's a must that you use Kyvan Sweet Barbecue Sauce, ranked number 15 in the world by Barbecue Superstars. This barbecue sauce is a must for the big game, for your tailgating needs. It's available at select Walmarts and Kroger's throughout the eastern half of the country. For locations, online orders, and recipes, check out their website at Kyvan82.com. And Kyvan is spelled Kyvan. If your local Walmart doesn't carry Kyvan Sweet Barbecue Sauce, well, request it. I'm sure they'll be happy to add it to their shelves for you. TNT is also sponsored by Dr. Peter Candelora and the great folks over at Coastal Orthopedics. Folks, if you're quietly or not so quietly suffering with joint pain, well, stop and do what the Gridiron Greats do to get relief, and that is contact Coastal Orthopedics. They can help you get back to enjoying life. For more information, check them out online at bone-dr.com. Like you've heard us say, right, baseball season, it's upon us now. If you love the game, you and your family are really going to love the Louisville Slugger Museum and Factory. It is a very cool experience for everyone in the family because you get to walk the live production line and see their bats being manufactured right there in front of you. They got a lot of cool exhibits going on right now. Don't miss the bat vault where you can actually hold game-used bats from so many of the game's great legends. I was so honored to handle Ted Williams' bat, Willie Stargell's bat, who I grew up idolizing. To find out more information about the museum and to book your visit, go to sluggermuseum.com. We're also thanking our sponsor, our good friends now. They're sponsors for us on the golf side and now have come over and are helping sponsoring the show on this football side, and that's the French Lick Resort. Folks, you're not going to find a better place to stay and play golf or to simply relax and enjoy yourself than at the French Lick Resort. If you've ever wondered what it would be like to play in a major golf tournament, well, you can do it year-round there on their Pete Dye course, home of last season's Senior PGA Championship and the LPGA Legends Championship. They also have a Donald Ross-designed course, the site of Walter Hagen's PGA victory back in 1924. Great spa. And, oh, by the way, they got a casino right there on the property as well. To find out more information and to book your stay, go to FrenchLick.com. We also say, please don't forget our friends over at the Gridiron Greats organization. Please help support a wonderful cause that's taking care of the guys who literally left so much of themselves out there on the field. These are the guys that, played back before they had, health care coverage. They still had to get jobs in the off season to help support themselves and their families. It is organizations like this one, started by Mike Ditka, the Gridiron Greats, who are trying to help, the guys that we all grew up watching and reading about. Please go to gridirongreats.org to see what you can do to get involved. All right, now back with us on the Kyvan Foods guest line is Mr. Beau Bock. He is the dean of Atlanta Sports Talk Radio. He was born in the Bronx, played his college football at the University of Miami. He's been the voice of Atlanta Sports Talk Radio since 1973. No one knows more about the Atlanta sports teams and their history than Beau Bock does. He's become a wonderful friend of the show, and we are very excited that he's back with us tonight on Thursday Night Tailgate. Hey, Beau, Chris, and Bob, thanks for coming back on the show.
Hey, Beau.
Hey, Chris. Hey, Bobby. How are you?
We're fantastic. Beau, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. I'm in this crazy market. We're the least competitive sports market in the country. I mean it. It's absolutely absurd. If I could write better, I'd write a book about this. I really would. I just don't know where to start. Now John Schuerholz is stepping aside. He's going to become vice chairman. And, everybody attributing this, we've got headlines here about Schuerholz this and Schuerholz did nothing. It was the most underachieving reign of any GM in baseball history. He took over a team in 1991. He came in as GM after the team had already been built by Paul Snyder and Roy Clark, our scouting department. These two guys, Paul Snyder was our director of personnel. and it just, it was ready to go. Don't forget in 1986, Stan Kasten, one of the Dodgers owners, was our GM. He was a GM for the Braves and the Hawks. And he said to Ted Turner, we've got to shut it down, Ted. We've got nothing in the pipeline. We've got to tell everybody we're not going to be competing. And that's what they did. They said, Braves fans, we apologize, but we're gonna fill the pipeline, and we're going to be back. So it took until 1990, and then going into 91, Schuerholz comes in. Bobby had been named manager just before that, which is a whole story in itself. And then Schuerholz, he came in after the free agency signing period. and we needed a first baseman and a third baseman, and the two guys left hanging out there just happened to be Sid Bream and Terry Pendleton. So we brought them aboard. That's the only moves he ever made. It's Greg Maddux. He turned down less money to play with us rather than the Yankees. So, I mean, what's that signing? And then after we won our one World Series, we were 1-14 in that glorious reign. He traded David Justice because David Justice was outspoken, and he was our World Series MVP. I mean, it's just been absolutely crazy. And now John Shawholt has administrated the demise of our pipeline again. Our minor league system is gone. We've got nothing coming up. And so he, took advantage of what somebody else did and then ran the system into the ground. And now he's retiring with all these trumpets and drums and all. It's ridiculous.
So to that point, Beau, right? I mean, we've seen them, deal off just about everybody, this off season. So, the idea that they got rid of Simmons and sent him, to the Angels, and there isn't much, at the major league level. But do you feel like at least what they're getting in return, what they've gotten in return for some of the trades they've made this off season, is that filling back up the pipeline? Are they stockpiling some good young?
Yeah, we've got a bunch of arms. None of them tested, none of them true, none of them having a good spring except for our veterans like Tehran. We have compiled that, and let's hope they pan out because Paul Snyder and Roy Clark's guys all panned out. So that's what's next to be seen.
So you would think, right, that they're trying to fill up the pipeline to get ready for the new season or the new stadium next season, 2017. The Braves are going to have a new stadium a little further north of Atlanta. Is that do you feel good if you're a Braves fan right now? Are you excited about next season for 2017?
No, for next season, the year after this, no.
Yeah.
I mean, we're supposed to be closer than that now. And right now, we're grasping at straws, to fill different positions. We brought back Jeff Francoeur, who's a nice kid and a local kid, and that's to ensure that we get the single moms and their kids coming to games. But other than that, there's not much to look forward to.
Bob, questions for Beau?
Hi, Beau. We love talking to you. And more on that stadium, Beau. Up here in New York, we've had the Yankees move into what I call not a ballpark, it's a shrine. And the Mets move into more of a stadium, which is Citi Field. What are you hearing about the layout of the new place in Atlanta, Beau? What do you expect, the type of clientele? What are we talking, money? Is this going to be something... Is it going to be something, a special place to hang out like Yankee Stadium is?
I don't know. Because we're never good at doing that type of. There was supposed to be a whole development around Turner Field, and that never happened. And so we were always talking. Now they're talking about a zip line at the stadium. You know what I mean? Well, I can understand if they're talking about from the bullpen. But, for people to go to a game and take zip, that's what we're all about. And we're going closer to the money, and we're going closer to suburbia. We're in suburbia now. The club has, if you could use one, I always talk about culture. If you don't have a culture, if you don't have a playing personality, then you really don't have a chance. You could get lucky. Law of averages could play a part once in a blue moon, but you're never going to sustain success. And if there's one word that describes the Braves over Shawholt's reign and this whole deal, this whole run from 1991 on, and the word is copacetic. We like it. It's nice. We don't have to compete. We're making tons of money. And everybody thinks, and the media is all in on the plan here. We're totally controlled by WSB media, radio, TV, print. This has got to be one of the last markets that ever got away with that, because 750, the WSB, the Cox Media Empire flagship station, is a clear channel station, which goes up to Chicago at night. So when you control that, and then you control the newspaper, and you control the major TV and radio station, how is that? They control the whole market. They control what is said and what is not said. If you're the fair-haired boy in this town, you're going to get taken care of. If you're not, you're going to be excluded.
Do you get the feeling, Beau, and man, this goes right down the line, and we talk about it all the time as far as sports and being outpriced and it becoming so corporate, especially up here in New York. At least the Yankees have won, Beau, but it caters to a crowd that is not like you or I, the people that are watching it on a daily basis. I mean, I go down there maybe once or twice in the summer. I get comp tickets, but and there's $9 beers, there's $7 waters.
I know how people do it.
You have people that have paid for seats, but they're sitting in the Jim Beam Lounge about 20 feet away watching it on TV.
I know.
It's really crazy, and I just hope it doesn't get that bad in Atlanta. Of course, they don't.
No,
it's
very close, very, very
Is it?
close.
Oh,
in fact, I was shocked. A buddy of mine, he's in Navy. I'm down there, press passes and stuff like that. So I don't ever really get a feeling of what it's like to be, a dad and buy tickets for, a couple of kids. Mm-hmm. It's an investment. I'm saying, he's got a 12-year-old kid, son, and he wanted to take him down to the game. It was, and then he's got to take his sister and mom, of course, So the family to go down there would be about $1,000 a night just to get decent seats. I'm not talking about it on the floor. I'm talking about the next level up.
No, that's very true. And Chris and I, you've talked with Chris. Having kids of your own, and I have kids, Yankee fans who have children. It's almost, do I go to a Yankee game or do I forego my family vacation at a resort somewhere? It's crazy.
Right.
Yes.
No, it's ridiculous.
Well, I wanted to get your thoughts on the Falcons and what they've done so far this offseason, particularly with free agency. They've been pretty active, particularly with the offensive line. Have they done enough? With what they've signed and what they've brought in. Plus, if you add a few good draft picks here, later in the month, can they get themselves back in the playoff picture?
Yeah, I think they can, Chris, and the problem is, our problem is not personnel at this point. This kid Sanu was getting a lot of bad raps that we brought in to take Roddy White's spot.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody said, no, he can't get off the ball anymore, and that's why we couldn't keep him. I had to let him go. But this kid Sanu, who flies, and he's maybe second only in size among wide receivers our horse. And I think he's going to be a great addition. People talk about his hands, but the guy's always open, and the ball that Matt Ryan throws. I meant to say Julio Jones.
Yeah, Julio
and the ball that Matt Ryan throws is a very catchable ball. And Matt is very instinctual. He will bounce back. In fact, that year, last year, with getting used to Shanahan and all that stuff, and Matt still hasn't been used to the best of his ability. And the best of his ability is him at the line of scrimmage and calling plays. That's where he's best. Matt has a great feel for the game. When he's controlling the game and making those calls, that's when we've always been the best. And he's always had, little windows to do that under Smitty, but not anymore. Not last year he didn't. And that's the way Matt Ryan works.
Mm-hmm.
He's a lot like Peyton. He really is. As far as intelligence, knowing the game, having a great intuition for the game, and we just haven't been able to do that because we've never had a coaching staff that isn't trying to, let's say, represent themselves properly. In other words, no one's really coaching. Everybody's just going through the kind of motions of how would somebody else do this, or how do you do it right, and what not to do, and all that stuff. We have absolutely no imagination up there. We've got 5 general managers in the front office, and then we've got Richie McKay at the top, who's a great, just a great charlatan. So it's a mess up there. So, if you get some personnel and you make a run, it's going to be good, but it's going to be short-lived.
Switch gears
a
little
to answer
bit.
your question, yes, we can make a run this year. I'm sorry.
That's all right. But one more before we let you go and switch gears a little bit to the University of Georgia. I wanted to get your thoughts, and we've got Tim Worley coming up next, and we're going to get Tim's take on this as well. What are your thoughts on Kirby Smart instituting the policy the players can't transfer to another team in the SEC or down to Miami?
I loved it, Chris. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I love it.
Yeah.
And the reason I love it, it has nothing to do with the kids and what's right, what's wrong. We've got a head coach that asserted himself. That's what Georgia has been running on cruise control since 1964 when Vince took over. When Vince Dooley took over, it's been on cruise control. It's never maximized its potential. And I like Kirby coming in here, kicking rump, taking names, and saying, no, that's not allowed. No one else who's previously coached for that would have done that except for Wally Butts. And that was, in the 50s. So, that's what I like about it. Now, is it right or wrong? You know what? This big college football is a big opportunity for kids. If you're not shaping up in the program that you signed on to play for, then leave. But you can't go to Miami because, and you can't go to another SEC school because they're competitors of ours. So yeah, I have no problem with it. I really don't. I think, and I get all these people who have never put on a jock in their lives, and they're all lamenting over the poor kids, and the guy can't go here and he can't go. This is big-time college football. It's under heavy regulation. And when you get there and you sign a letter of intent, hey, you're giving yourself to that university, and you're going to take advantage of the educational possibilities that they have for you. And if you don't want to take advantage of that, then live by the rules when you leave. And the rules that have just been set down by our new head coach is that, no, you can't go to an SEC school and you can't go to Miami.
Right. Now, it'll be interesting to see how.
I think one. Excuse me, Chris. I think one of the reasons is, and this is purely coming off my fantasy brain. All right, is that I think that Kirby over there in Alabama, like all those people, have always looked at Georgia and snickered because we have the talent, we have the Alabama talent, we have the facilities. We're building a new indoor facility right now. I mean, everything is in place. Recruiting, it's right here. We're in the bread box, and they just snicker at us because we have underachieved. We were playing with soft defenses, except for the last 2 years with Pruitt. Those have been solid defenses. But went for 6 years before that with a guy named Todd Graham, who couldn't coach a lick. And this Georgia thing is a heck of an opportunity. Georgia's supposed to be a major football institution, and while they are on paper, they never are in reality.
Mm-hmm. Beau, how can our listeners follow you?
I love the fact that he's taking the bull by the horns.
Yeah, no, it's going to be interesting to see how Georgia, how the players and the fans react and what he's able to build there. So,
I really think it's going to be a new era. I think you're going to love it. I think it's going to be as dramatic as heck, the difference between this and all those years with Dooley and leading up to this and all that stuff.
Beau, how can our listeners follow you online and over social media?
It's Beau Bock 790, BEAUBOCK 790. And if you want to send me your email address, I write a daily commentary, which goes out via email, and send that to BEAUBOCK, BeauBock@gmail.com.
Awesome. Beau, thank you.
On Twitter, it's Beau Bock 790. I'm sorry. I'm a plumber with social media. I'm trying to find an advisor.
Well, thank you so much for taking time to jump on the show with us again tonight. We have really grown to enjoy getting to spend some time with you and have you as part of the show. You're fantastic.
Thanks. See you, Chris. Good seeing you, Bobby.
You too. We'll talk soon.
Take care, Beau.
Bye.
That is Beau Bock. He is the, like I say, the dean of Atlanta Sports Talk Radio. You want to know what's going on in Atlanta sports? You want someone who's going to lay it on the line and tell you how it is? Beau Bock's your guy. Great stuff, Bob.
Yeah, like we said, Chris, Paul Alexander, the guy in Pittsburgh, and Beau, I just love his attitude. You know, us up here in the Northeast, we don't get to really get that feeling of how things really are in Atlanta. We have a feeling that, hey, everything's well managed down there. They're building a new stadium, but you get the real scoop on Beau. And if you're an Atlanta fan, you got to be pretty frustrated in various sports.
Indeed. We've got our next guest, Tim Worley, hanging on the line. We're going to get to Tim on the other side of this station identification.
This is Reggie Kelly, former Cincinnati Bengals and Atlanta Falcons tight end, and you're listening to TNT, Thursday Night Tailgate. Brace yourself for the explosion.
And now back with us on the Kyvan Foods guest line is one of our inaugural members of the Thursday Night Tailgate Hall of Fame, and that's Tim Worley. Tim first joined us back in February of 2012, so we were just a few months old and into the show when Tim first came on with us. And tonight's going to mark the sixth time that we've had the privilege of having Tim on the show. Let me remind you, briefly about his background. He's from Lumberton, North Carolina. At Lumberton High School, he was recognized as a Parade Magazine All-American. Tim also ran track, and as a senior, he won the state title in both the 100 and 200-meter dash. He played his college ball at the University of Georgia in 1988. He was a first-team All-American and the SEC Offensive Player of the Year. His 27 rushing touchdowns still ranks him sixth all-time at Georgia, and he is 12th on the rushing list, despite having only played just barely over 2 seasons due to a knee injury. He was a first-round draft pick, the 7th overall selection by the Pittsburgh Steelers in 1989, and he played in the league from 89 to 94 for my Steelers and the Bears. In 2007, he was inducted into the Georgia-Florida Hall of Fame. In 2013, he was named an SEC legend by the conference. In 2014, we inducted him into the Thursday Night Tailgate Hall of Fame, and we are honored that he is back with us tonight on TNT. Good evening, Brother Tim. Chris and Bob here. Thanks for coming back on the show.
Hey, Tim.
Chris and Bob. Hey, guys. Long time no hear from.
You too.
It's certainly an honor to have you back with us. Tim, how have you been?
I've been pretty good, man. I've been busy, been traveling a lot, doing some different things, and just enjoying life, man. It's been a minute. I'm glad you guys have me on the show tonight.
Yeah, so catch us up. What's been going on with you and Dee, your wife Dee, and Worley Global Enterprises?
Well, a lot of new things. We're actually still planning to move to the Nashville area, Franklin, Tennessee, hopefully this year. I'm still doing a lot of speaking, pretty much a lot in the South. I'm contracted with a company called K-Love and Air One Radio, Dare to Dream. It's a program where we go into middle schools and high schools, and we put on assemblies, just encouraging kids to continue to dream and to pull themselves away from negativity. And right now it's been successful, and I'm excited about being a part of it.
And Tim, you probably heard we were just talking to Beau Bock and talking to him about your alma mater, University of Georgia, and Kirby Smart coming in and kind of changing up the policy, if you will, and not allowing kids to transfer to another SEC school or down, following Mark Richt down to the University of Miami. As a guy who is a legend there at the University of Georgia, curious to get your take. As a former player, how does that resonate with you?
Well, first of all, I like Kirby Smart. I love what he's doing. I don't have a problem with him making the rule that the players can't transfer to any other SEC school or Miami. I mean, I totally agree with what Beau was saying, and he's come in and he's asserted himself. He's put the stamp, the seal on it, and it's his rules. And I appreciate Kirby coming in right away and being aggressive and stepping up things. And to me, that's just the mark of a champion to me, and I think University of Georgia needed that.
Yeah, so as you look at the University of Georgia and their football program, obviously Kirby Smart comes over from Alabama. When college football, I have to imagine over the last few years in the Worley household is very good for your wife Dee, not so good for you. Talk about getting Kirby Smart to come over from Alabama, and what do you think that's going to mean for the Georgia football program and the contrast between what it appears like he's going to be like versus what you had with Mark Richt?
Well, first of all, Kirby is, he's family. He's a Georgia boy, played defensive back at Georgia back in the 90s. And, you got to look at where he came from. I mean, he's been under Nick Saban for over 8 years and a winning program, winning championships. So obviously he has championship in his blood. And I just appreciate what he's bringing to the table. And, Georgia, we really need that. I was listening to some of the things that Beau was saying and talking about Georgia kind of being neutral, so to speak, and not aggressive. And we've been that way for a long time. And I just think, Georgia needed that change. We have the talent. I believe that Georgia, and I'm not being biased, Georgia has probably some of the best talent in the nation, but for some reason we could just never get over that hump. We could never win the big game. And I think now that we have Kirby Smart in place, and not only Coach Smart, but some of the guys that he hired, the offensive coach and the different coaches that he picked up. And I think they got a winning crew here. I mean, the attitudes have changed over there in Athens. I was in Athens about 3 weeks ago, guys, and actually spoke to the team for about 45 minutes. And it's a whole different atmosphere over there now. And I think they're buying into what Coach Smart brings to the table.
Bob, questions for Tim?
Always an honor to speak with you, Tim, and please give our regards to your lovely wife, Dee. She's always been so terrific in keeping the lines of communication open as far as your availability, and I know you know that you're blessed to have her in your life, that's for sure.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
But, Tim, we have a theme going tonight with Tony Mandarich coming on, first-round draft picks that probably did not live up to their potential and their true greatness, because guys like yourself and Mandarich were incredibly great football players. And, whenever we speak, we talk about guys like Johnny Manziel. And when you got out of college, Tim, and saw the pro game ahead of you, did you have that person in your life who could gain control of you and put you on that leash and say, this is how it has to be? Obviously, it went awry somewhere. It's happening still, obviously, to guys like Johnny Manziel. How does this continue to happen, Tim?
Well, first of all, I'll answer the question. I did not have that, guys. I was pretty much on my own, and the people that I had in my circle, I realized, when I look back at it, I had what I call a bunch of yes people in my circle. Whatever Tim said, that's what went. And basically what I needed, and I take full responsibility for my issues that I had, that I dealt with, but what I needed was people that was going to stand in my face and tell me no. People that was going to tell me what I needed to hear, not what I wanted to hear. And, I point the blame at me on that. And one of the things that I think that's improved a lot as far as helping these young guys when they come into the league, come in overnight millionaires, they have now in place player engagement. They have people in place that can help you in those areas. Back in the late 80s and the 90s, man, I was pretty much on my own. You put a couple of $1 million in my bank account and you stick me in a brand new city, and basically when you don't know who you are, man, you're gonna go crazy. Especially when things are right there in front of you, you're just gonna go wild. And that's what you see Johnny Manziel doing now. And basically, I look back at that time, that mindset when I was in my 20s, and a lot of times we really don't want to hear it because we think we're invincible. But, sometimes it takes, and I hate to say this, but sometimes it takes like a tragedy or something major, something seriously defining, that defining moment to happen for these guys to open up their eyes. And it took me a while, fellas, just to turn it around and to start listening to people and finally get it. But it took me losing everything, and it took me shortening my career because of stupid choices.
So that seems to me, Tim, that it would be so important to get the message across to young people. And I know you have a chance to speak with youngsters a lot. Are you very, very candid with them and tell them, the details of what happened to you? And you really can't get these kids early enough. That's my opinion.
No, and I'm very open. I'm very transparent, and I'll go into detail. The one thing you guys will find out about me, and you know this, I don't water anything down. And I'll tell people, when I stepped into the league, it became a party. The Pittsburgh Steelers invested millions of dollars into me within a 5-year contract, and for about, they didn't get a return on their investment. They got probably one good year out of me, and that was my rookie year. But when I stepped into the NFL, I took my foot off the gas like I see some of the guys doing today, and it was just a big old party. And see, basically, when these guys don't know who they are, just like I was, you'll fall for anything. I mean, it's just a party around you all the time. Women coming from every direction, women in every city you go. And when you don't know who you are, and I'm gonna keep emphasizing that, you will fall for that stuff. The business is not important anymore. It's just party, 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 and you think it's never gonna end. But one day, it's going to end. One day, you're not going to be able to run as fast. One day, your body's not going to be able to react and do what you want it to do, and all of a sudden, it's over. And now you're mad, just like I was. I was mad. I was angry. Mm-hmm. But, I had to learn the hard way. And one of the things I try to tell these guys, man, listen, you don't have to learn this the hard way. I didn't understand the business coming in because nobody never sat me down and told me about the business, and I had to learn things from myself, and by the time I learned it, it was too late.
And Tim, as Bob, points out Johnny Manziel, and as a former Steeler, now we see Steelers wide receiver Martavis Bryant. He's going down a path that I think you're very familiar with. How do you reach a guy, a young kid like Martavis, and get him back on the right path before he sabotages his career?
Well, first of all, I mean, I do believe that, guys, I believe in prayer. I do believe in prayer, and I'm always pray about stuff. But, a lot of times when we talk to these guys, they can relate, especially if you've been there. Sometimes when you come in, man, and guys that they can't really relate to guys that's never been in that scene, that's never been in that lifestyle, that's never actually played the game. And, when somebody comes in and they have the statistics to prove it, they have the cap and the T-shirt to prove it. Sometimes there's a large percent where guys will listen to that. I have a credibility. When I go back to the University of Georgia and speak to these young men, when I go to different places and speak to these young men, I have a credibility because, my number one credibility is I survived it. I'm here to talk about it. So let me tell you something so you won't even step in that arena, So that credibility of being a first rounder, of being in the mix of it, not just an average football player, but drafted in the first round. For some reason, that gets those guys' attention. And then I start telling them the negative and the dumb, stupid choices that I made. Some of the guys listen, some of them don't.
Yeah, and we're talking with Tim Worley here on Thursday Night Tailgate. Tim, one more before we let you go, but was there something that someone could have said to you, when you were a young kid going through the things that, Martavis and Johnny Manziel are doing now? Is there something that someone could have said to you that might have changed the course for you?
Of course. All I needed, Chris, was somebody to just grab me, stand toe-to-toe to me and said, no. I had all yes in my camp. And I'm not talking about the people in the organization, the Steelers or the Bears organization. I'm talking about people that you're around every day, people that you're around out in the streets or at your home. Look me in my eye and tell me no. And I would have listened to that. I believe that I would have listened to that because, we're already dealing with trust issues. I know I couldn't trust anybody. And I knew there were people hanging around just because of my status and what I was doing and the position that I had. But did they really care? I can't say they really cared because everybody agreed with my debauchery.
Mm-hmm.
And so you need that person in your circle of trust that's going to stand toe-to-toe. I'm 6'2", 240, stand toe-to-toe with you and say, look here, man, I love you. I care about you too much. I'm not going to let you go down that road, and I'm not going to let you continue that foul behavior that you're doing. I needed that.
Yeah. So, and now in the things that you're doing, Tim, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that that's the role you're trying to fulfill for young men, whether it's at the University of Georgia, any high school kids, college kids, guys that are in the NFL now. That's the thing that I think you are trying to do to make sure that they don't follow the same path that you followed, right?
Right, exactly. And and I'm going to do this until the good Lord decides to bring me on home, man. Because Chris and Bob, man, I'm blessed, man. I'm here to talk about it. It reminds me of Lenny Bias. I used to watch Len Bias when he was in his prime, and by far, we all thought he was one of the best basketball players in the world back in his time. But see, Len pretty much did the same thing I did. I did what he did, but see, Len's not here to talk about it.
Yeah.
He's not here to talk about it, and I'm here to talk about it. And I guarantee you, if Len had a chance to come back and tell folk, he'll tell them not only do you stay away from that drug infested, alcohol infested lifestyle, but you also be careful of the people that you have in your circle, because true friends are not going to encourage you to put cocaine up your nose or to smoke weed or to drive drunk. They're not going to do that. A true friend is going to tell you the truth, and the truth hurts, and that's what I needed.
Tim, remind our listeners how they can keep up with you and your wife, Dee, both online and over social media as well.
Okay, guys. Our company is Worley Global Enterprises, and our website is worleyglobalenterprises.com, and our Facebook page is facebook.com/WGEINC, and our Twitter handle is @WorleyGlobalBiz. You guys can connect with us there and see what we're talking about.
There you go. Tim,
Great
thank
stuff.
you so much for taking time out of your night. A world of friendship between us and you and Dee. We really appreciate you coming on the show, all your support. We hope you'll continue to come back and join us and keep us updated with the things that you guys are doing. It's fantastic stuff.
I sure will, Chris. Thank you guys for having me, man. Bob, thank you, and you guys have a lovely evening.
You too, Tim. Take care.
All right.
That is
bye-bye.
Former University of Georgia, Pittsburgh Steelers, and Chicago Bears running back Tim Worley. And, Bob, a guy that we've had on the show many times. Obviously, he's a member of our Hall of Fame, but a guy trying to, take his story and turn it into a positive. And when you hear Tim speak, it's very moving.
One of the most passionate guys we'll ever have on the show, and that's why he's in our Hall of Fame, Chris. But you almost can hear there's still some frustration, still a little anger, but guess what? He can channel it. He's just so happy to be here, a very religious man, and tries to impart that on others. Chris, he's saved lives already and has saved kids from going down the wrong path. And if he were to leave this world tomorrow, he'd be the first to say, I've done what I was put here for. So we're very honored to have him, not just as a Hall of Famer, but as a good friend.
Absolutely right. All right, we've got our next guest, Tony Mandarich, hanging on the line. We're going to get to Tony on the other side of this word from our friends over at Kyvan Foods.
This is Reggie Kelly, former Cincinnati Bengals and Atlanta Falcons tight end, and I'm the owner of Kyvan Foods. And if you enjoy delicious food, you're going to love my Kyvan products, which consist of our honey apple salsa, sweet barbecue sauce, and an array of seasonings. For store locations, online orders, and recipes, check out our website at www.kyvan82.com. That's KYVAN 82.com. One taste, and you'll appreciate the goodness.
This is Christine Lisi, and you're listening to Thursday Night Tailgate, where NFL stars go to tell their stories with Chris Mascaro and Bob-Lazzari on the Armed Forces Radio Network.
And now joining us on the Kaiven Foods guest line is Tony Mandarich. Let me remind you about Tony's background. He's from Oakville, Ontario. He is the highest drafted Canadian-born player in NFL history. He was recruited to play his college ball at Michigan State by then defensive backs coach Nick Saban. He was a first-team All-American, an Outland Trophy finalist, and two-time Big Ten Lineman of the Year. He was a first-round draft pick, the number 2 overall selection in 1989 by the Green Bay Packers, and played with the Packers from 89 to 92. Packers released him in 92, and he left the game for a few years due to drug and alcohol and rehab for a little while. Returned in 1996 and played for the Colts through 1998, including starting all 16 games in 1997 and earning Comeback Player of the Year award for the Colts in 1996. Tony now runs Tony Mandarich Creatives, which is he's a digital photographer, digital artist, public speaker, trying to, like Tim Worley, our prior guest, trying to help others learn from his life experiences. And we are very honored that he is with us tonight on Thursday Night Tailgate. Hey, Tony, Chris, and Bob here. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Tony.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me. And, I didn't know. I got to listen to the last 10 minutes of the Worley interview. And, man, I tell you what, that's a tough act to follow because he was telling my story. Everything he was saying, I was like, oh, my gosh, that's exactly the stuff that happened to me. And, a lot of respect for the guy, and he was a terror in college. I remember watching him. He was a terror.
So, Tony, to that point, right, there's been a lot of things written and said about you and your playing career. I think it's time that, you get to tell your story. If you don't mind, take us through, your time at Michigan State playing for the Packers and help us see your career through your eyes.
Well, and obviously we'll try to make it as brief as possible, but I will give you the linear timeline, and I'll go back even to 11 years old. At 11 years old, I made a decision in Canada that I was going to play in the NFL because I was watching the Buffalo Bills and I was watching Detroit Lions because we lived within proximity of them. And back then, you only had a few channels of TV to watch. And I just had such a huge passion for the game and ended up going to and when I decided that I was going to play in the NFL, now 11 years old is pretty young to make a clear decision. I said to myself, every decision I make from here forward in my life, I'm, fairly major decision, I'm going to ask myself, is this helping me get closer to my goal or is this becoming a distraction? And I did that for years, and I did it all the way till I retired. And then, I went to high school, did not start as a freshman in high school in Canada. Started my 10th grade and 11th grade I started. And then Canada at the time had 13 grades in high school. You went to high school for 5 years. But that going into that fourth year, I ended up moving down to Ohio to live with my brother who was playing football at Kent State University. And I enrolled into Kent Roosevelt High School, and John Nemec was the head coach there, and we kind of explained the situation to him, saying, look, the sole purpose of this whole move is to get exposure because Kent Roosevelt obviously has great players that scouts will be looking at, and hopefully I can come down, catch somebody's eye, and try to get a scholarship to a school. They welcomed me with open arms. I'll never forget it. And they treated me like family, and they didn't have to. So fortunately, the plan was working out. I got offered to Michigan State. I felt like I was going to fit in there well. I liked George Perlis' attitude. I liked Nick Saban's attitude and how he coached. And Michigan State was just coming off probation, so I had a good opportunity to play there early. And there was a specific game, my rookie year or my freshman year, we were playing Notre Dame at Michigan State, and Mark Bavaro was the tight end for the Fighting Irish, and I watched him line up and he was twice as big as I was, and he was a tight end, and I was an offensive tackle. And I'm on the sideline watching this, and I'm thinking to myself, I've got to hit the weight room because I will never survive this level of football. So from that kind of point on, for me, the steroids came into play. Even though I had dabbled in them like for the 5 or 6 months prior to that, that's when it was a confirmation to me that it was a necessity to do if you're going to become an elite. And that was my perception. And then over, again, I wrote my goals down my rookie or my freshman year at Michigan State, and I wrote down that I wanted to win the Outland. I wanted to be Big Ten Lineman of the Year. I wanted to be an All-American. I wanted to start my second year. I didn't put Heisman down because I felt it's a specialty position award. And then I literally wrote down that I wanted to be the first player taken in the draft my draft year. And being the second player taken, I still have considered that reaching the goal because of circumstance of who needed what as far as position goes. So I was lucky enough to achieve a lot of those things. The problem was I did steroids, and the rules were you don't do steroids. So I could cheat on the drug tests. I cheated on the Rose Bowl drug test. I cheated on the Gator Bowl drug test when we played against Georgia. It was not difficult to cheat on NCAA tests then. I don't know what they do now. But I did know going into the NFL that drug testing was a lot more sophisticated, and I was not going to be able to pass that test. Well, I would take steroids for 12 weeks, and then I would get off steroids for 12 weeks. So, and I did this for 5 years. So you lose about, I would say somewhere between 10 and 20% of your strength once you get off of them. So if you're benching close to 600 pounds and you get on steroids, and now you're only benching 500 pounds, you're still pretty damn strong. Okay?
Right.
So when I got to Green Bay, there was literally a day I remember I stopped the steroids because I knew I couldn't do them anymore, and I filled the void immediately with painkillers and alcohol. And the tragic and amusing thing to see at the same time was everybody, all the media, all the fans, all the people, they were all like, see, it's the steroids. And it wasn't the steroids. It was the drugs and alcohol. It was the painkillers. It was the alcohol abuse. Because when you're 20% not as strong or as you are when you're on steroids, and like I said, you're benching now 500 pounds because you're not on steroids. You're squatting 700 pounds because you're not on steroids. But when you were on steroids, you were squatting 850. So you're still pretty strong. But when you're half in the bag with painkillers and you're loopy, it doesn't matter what you are, you're just not there mentally. And so the distraction of steroids that everybody focused on took the distraction off of alcohol and painkillers. And, nobody really knew that until I wrote the book in 2009 and just kind of laid it all out there. There were some, a lot of people knew, but they were just conversations that I had with teammates or coaches and stuff like that. But the masses didn't know, and a lot of the masses still don't know that it really was the painkillers and the alcohol. And that being said, that doesn't mean that I encourage steroid use. The biggest problem with steroids are they work. And when you get these kids in high school, and I see it all the time, I see it at the gym I work out at, I see a kid go from 210 to 240 in 5 months. It's, it's like, I'm not stupid. I was there. I did it. I know it, and it's just kind of like, I'll tell the kid, hey, just be careful. And I'll never have talked to the kid before. And I'll just say, hey, with what you're doing, just be careful. And he knows exactly what I'm talking about. But I don't want to intrude unless he wants to hear it. And if he says, well, what do you mean? And I'll take 5 minutes to say, hey, let me tell you my story real quick. I thought I was bulletproof. I thought I could do this. I thought I could get away with it. I thought I could cheat the system. And really who I ended up cheating the most was myself. And hurting a lot of people and kind of made that stereotype of that arrogant athlete, because that's what I was. And, luckily, I got a second chance in Indianapolis. And because nobody really had to give me a second chance. I was one of those people that was like, if I'm going to burn a bridge, I'm going to do it right and burn all of them. And so when I left the league, I was like, it was everybody's fault but mine. It was media's fault. It was my parents' fault. It was my wife's fault. It was my brother's fault. Everybody but me. And then, and I was like, it can't get worse. And, 3 years later, it got worse. And then ended up putting myself into treatment, got sober. And then here I am now 21 years later, and I'm like, daily ask myself the question, why does a guy like me, who did all that nonsense and all that stupidity, get to live a great life like this? And I don't live in a mansion. I live in a nice, modest little 2,000 square foot condo. I don't drive a Benz. I've got a Jeep. I do what I love with photography and do what I love with helping people. Why do I get to live that life? And I know why. It's to carry the message. It's the same thing that Tim said. It's carrying the message and letting people know there's a different way to do it. And I'm a living example of how not to do it. But luckily, and it was crucial that I came back and I played sober, steroid-free, painkiller-free, alcohol-free, and it proved to me that sobriety does work. And just doing those things that they ask you to do, if you do them, you can be sober and not just be sober, but live a happy life. And the biggest awakening moment for me was when I was sitting in a treatment center, and I went voluntarily because I was sick and tired of myself. I went voluntarily, and the thing that hit me the hardest when I hit that treatment center was about 3 days in, and we were in a group session of 10 people, and there was like a counselor running the group session, and it was a female, and she said, I want all you guys to know that your best thinking and your best plans in your life got you here. And I thought to myself, oh my God, she's right.
Wow.
And it was like the Louisville Slugger across your head. And, I get chills even talking about it now, because that was a moment where I was like, wow, all these grand plans that I had, and, putting myself in the Hall of Fame before I, even stepped on a practice field, and now, considered one of the biggest busts in NFL history. And it's absolutely valid with Green Bay. That is true. I back that up. I'll be the first to admit it. But a lot of people disregard the comeback. And that doesn't mean it makes things, and it doesn't mean it makes things right, because there's some things you just can't make right. But what it does show is, if you really want to do something, you can overcome stuff. You can overcome anything. And it's just doing the things the right way. And really that's the story. And the last 21 years, there's been 2 divorces. So not everything's been happy. But you know what? There hasn't been a day gone by without some laughter in it. And I've not had to medicate to deal with anything. And instead of medicating, I would hit my knees and open my arms and ask for, God's help, and say, you know what? I'm getting my ass kicked right here, and I need to know what to do. So please give me a sign. And, and I know, Tim would relate to that. And, he would probably say it in a much more eloquent way than I did, but that's pretty. But that's pretty much, that's pretty much how it is. I mean, and that's how I start my day. And I also, listen, even when things are going good, I do that stuff. And I'm grateful for the life I have because, honestly, I'm living on borrowed time. I see some of these guys dying, some of these guys committing suicide, some of these guys barely walking, some of these guys can't remember their wife's name. They're having these rage fits from the concussions and from abuse of pills. And I'm thinking to myself, why was it different for me? Why was it different? And for me, as for I think most people, pain motivates. Pain will motivate change. And I had enough emotional pain that I was sick and tired of my stuff. And I said, enough. I said, you're a hypocrite, you're a liar, you're a POS, and, what are you going to do about it? And that was the question I asked myself. And this was, a week before I got into treatment. I said, what are you going to do about it? And I was looking in the mirror, and I was like, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to crawl into a cave and die and fade away with your tail tucked between your legs? Or are you going to grab the bull by the horns and try to salvage something? And I'm not wired for the cave. So I was like, hey, if I come back and try to make some things right, and not just with football, but with life, what do I have to lose? They've called me everything in the book already. They've called me every name. What else can they call me, right? So I had nothing to lose. And if I fail, I'm supposed to fail. So but it's kind of like one of the questions that they asked me at the press conference when I signed with Green Bay was, are you embarrassed that you're making minimum wage your first year of your contract because it's $196,000, and when you left the league 3 years ago, you were making over $1 million? And I thought to myself, if this guy only knew the last 3 years of hell that I've lived with drugs and alcohol, that I would not wish upon anybody. It was like I wanted to say I would play for free, but I didn't want to say it too loud, right? Because then they wouldn't pay me. But it was kind of like I was so grateful that the Colts gave me a chance, and that Jim Irsay and his dad gave me a chance, and Coach Infante and Bill Tobin and all those guys. I mean, they did not have to take a chance on me. But when I went down there and I saw them, I told them the damn truth, and I said, "This is the deal." I said, if you invest in me, you're investing in damaged goods. But I'll tell you what, if I make a mistake, it's going to be at full speed, and I'll give you everything I got. And I think that I know they saw the change in me, and I think physically they saw the change in me also, and they saw that I took accountability. And I think they were like, hey, what do we have to lose as an organization? We're paying a guy minimum wage that was the second pick in the draft. And I didn't play the Pro Bowl level that obviously I would have liked to have played, but I was a starter for 2.5 years, and I kind of slayed my demons. And as far as football goes, and then the shoulder wore out, and it was time to move on, and it was kind of like, okay, we've done it. What's next? What's next on the list? And let's challenge ourselves in whatever it is, and let's do it, and let's do it right.
It's an amazing story and an amazing comeback. And we're talking to former number 2 overall draft pick for the Green Bay Packers and former Michigan State and Indianapolis Colts offensive lineman Tony Mandarich. And Tony, we've got our next guest, Rocky Bleier, hanging on the line. We got to get to Rocky, but you've got an amazing story, and it is an amazing comeback. And people do discount, the comeback that you had with the Colts, comeback player of the year. for them. And you've got such an amazing story to tell. We hope you'll come back and join us, sometime soon, because there's so much more that I'm sure Bob wanted to ask and I wanted to ask of you.
Sure.
I hope you'll come back and do it, because you've got such a great story and you're so fantastic.
Anytime you guys just call me.
Yeah.
Tony, let everybody know how they can find you over social media and briefly about your photography business that you've got going now.
Yeah. My website is my name, Tony Mandarich, and that's as far as websites go. Just type in my name. That's where all my photography is, and you can contact me there. My Facebook page is facebook.com/Tony Mandarich Creatives, all one word, and that's the best way to get me on Facebook. Instagram, it's just Tony Mandarich, and Twitter, it's Tony_Mandarich. But yeah, that's the best way to get me. And I do want to say one thing before I go is, you said you got Rocky Bleier coming on, and I watched him growing up. Okay, he was like, the Steelers were the shit. I shouldn't say that. The Steelers were they were it. And I love the Pittsburgh Steelers. And George Perlis, right, our head coach at Michigan State, was a Steeler. The NFL was built on the shoulders of people like Rocky Bleier and people like Franco Harris and people like Mike Webster. And, and that's just a few guys I'm mentioning from one team. So I just want them to know we acknowledge that and we recognize that, and we wish that the NFL or the NFLPA or that we can somehow take care of them better, because we wouldn't have had the opportunity without guys like that. So,
wow.
With that, anytime you guys need to fill a dead spot, you know who to call.
Well, I appreciate that very much, Tony. And we got to get you back on here soon, because, like I said, there's so many other things we wanted to get to. But the most important thing is I wanted you to be able to tell your story, because I think people have enough preconceptions about who you are or what happened and that sort of thing, that I wanted you to get what actually happened out there. And I thank you for doing that.
Yeah, and I appreciate the platform. I appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Thank
take
you,
care,
Tony.
Tony.
All right. Have a great night.
That is former Michigan State, Green Bay Packers, and Indianapolis Colts #2 overall draft pick back in 1989, Tony Mandarich. And Bob, boy, and I just sat back and listened to Tony tell the story, and that's something I think is very important. We had Tim tell his story, Tim Worley earlier in the show. Then we bring Tony Mandarich. Both guys, by the way, in the 1989 draft. Second overall pick was Mandarich. The 7th overall pick was Tim Worley. Both guys having very similar stories, but very powerful to hear it coming through, seeing what happened with Tony and having him tell it through his eyes.
It's incredibly candid, Chris, and I think we did it the right way. Let him tell his story. It's out there. I don't think it's anything you and I didn't know. Little enlightening, but now The next time we talk to him, he'll become a good friend of the show, and I think we can really get inside some great questions. But probably the most dominant lineman I've ever seen come out of college.
Yeah, absolutely he was. And like I say, boy, it was chilling just to sit back and listen to him tell a story. But that's what we do here on Thursday Night Tailgate. We let those guys tell their stories. Yeah. And we've got our next guest, been very patient with us, hanging on the line, and now joining us on the Kyvan Foods guest line is Steelers legend Rocky Bleier. And Rocky this is his 7th appearance with us. He's a TNT Hall of Famer. He was the #2 guest that we ever had on the show going back 4.5 years ago when we first started out. Let me remind everyone quickly about Rocky's background. He's from Appleton, Wisconsin. At Xavier High School, he starred in football and in basketball. He was a 3-time All-State selection at running back, won all-conference honors at linebacker and defensive back, played his college ball at Notre Dame, where he helped them win the 1966 national championship, and he was a team captain in 1967. A 16th round draft choice by the Pittsburgh Steelers in 68 during his rookie year. We know he was drafted into the U.S. Army and went to fight over in Vietnam. He was awarded the Bronze Star and the Purple Heart after being injured in the line of duty. He rejoined the Steelers in 71. but couldn't walk without pain. And Joe Green loves to tell the story about how Rocky was purple from head to toe at times during practice and working out. He spent the next 2 years trying to regain his spot. He was waived 2 times by the Steelers, but became obviously a part of all 4 of their Super Bowl championship teams in the 70s. Retired after the 1980 season, having rushed for 3,865 yards, added another 1,294 receiving yards, scored 25 touchdowns, and averaged 4.2 yards per carry over the course of his career. Back in 2014, Rock became one of our inaugural inductees into the Thursday Night Tailgate Hall of Fame, and tonight we are very thrilled and very appreciative of his patience as he comes back and joins us on Thursday Night Tailgate. Hey, Rock, Chris and Bob here. Thank you for coming back on the show.
Thanks for coming back. Thank you, Rocky.
Fine. It's about time I get to say hi, guys. With that long introduction, it's nice to be back on the show. Thank you very much. And Bob, good to hear your voice as well. What a wonderful story. I mean, I was on the line. I did hear the end of Tony's story. And I really didn't know that story, about Tony and through that, period of time. But any one of your listeners had to be hanging on every word because it's a great story of a comeback. It's a great story of perseverance, of understanding who you are, of facing your demons, and taking the steps to be able to be productive. And he proved to himself that he was the lineman that he always wanted to be. And coming back, especially those last years with the Colts, and then to go on with his life as it is, and to be able to tell the story. It's very difficult. I think it's very difficult today, especially, is to be very, very blunt and very honest in a time, in an era of trying to smooth the general population of who they might think you are. But we all go through, obviously, trials and tribulations. And so, if anybody wasn't inspired about the fact that there is hope, and there is a chance, and there is an opportunity, and you have to make those choices and the decision, and live up to one's own responsibility. That's a wonderful testimony by Tony. So so I'm glad I got on early and was able to listen to the end of that. So thank you.
Absolutely, thank you, Rock.
Yeah, you're welcome. So what do you guys have? What are you guys talking about tonight?
Well, Rock, you talk about Tony sharing, his life story. It's interesting. Last fall, you did kind of a one-man play about your life and got great reviews in the local papers up there. Talk about it's got to take a lot of courage to get up there and handle a one-man show. Talk about doing that.
Well, that was I guess it's like everything else. There was a long time in coming. That show. People say, well, how come or why did you do that or whatever it was, and. As you well know, and your listeners, most of my adult life, I've made a living giving speeches around the country, telling my story, but giving people hope, hopefully within their own lives, and overcoming obstacles and being the best you can be, and reaching for the goals that you've set in your life. Those kinds of things, But anyway, it was a couple of years ago. There was a book that was written called Their Life's Work. You might it just came out a couple of years ago about the
Gary Pomerantz.
Yes, with Gary Pomerantz, and so I was involved or being interviewed with Gary and involved with in that book, and so I read the book, and I felt we did a wonderful job. And what a wonderful writer in his prose, and to be able to capture a time and stories that I hadn't heard, and the impact of people within the organization that changed the course and direction of the Steelers and then their successes. And I don't know, I got caught up in the moment, and all of a sudden I got to thinking, wow, what it would be like to be able to tell those stories from a player's perspective. And I guess my analogy at the time was, okay, now that we've just celebrated Easter, which was, what was the Last Supper really like? I mean, we know the story, or what has been written and told to us in a religious manner. But in all honesty, humanity is humanity. So what was the really like all those 2,000 years ago? You know, was Judas saying, God, I wish Peter would take a bath or something? Or, you know, oh my God, you know, no one combs their hair, you know. Given the situation, I was just thinking, okay, fine. So, you know, and I thought, well, maybe those stories need to be told about the inside of a successful season or of the Steelers during that period of time. And so, you know, and in my mind, I'd put together some things, and all of a sudden, all it takes, as you well know, with anybody, is somebody to say, hey, that's a pretty good idea, or yeah, maybe you should, or explore it some more. And it's like when you're doing this show. When you first did this show 4.5 years ago, you had an idea, but it really wasn't until somebody said, hey, I think that's really a good idea. You should do it, you know, and here, maybe I'll help you, or maybe I'll do this. And then you finally push it. Well, we did that, and I had an idea, but as it boiled down to a friend who is a sports writer here by the name of Gene Collier. And Gene had written a play called The Chief about Mr. Rooney, and a very successful play that played for many years here on the local theater stage, a one-man play. So I posed this question to him as well as some help, and he goes, nah, all those stories have been told. I mean, you just read about them. They've all been told in every book that has ever been written about the Steelers or so on, or on television. I think there's more to your story that needs to be told. And so ultimately that was another push in that direction. And so I got some people that were interested in pursuing this, and we pushed it some more. And ultimately we come up with a play that we had last September. It was an interesting experience, not being, quote, an actor or having ever performed in that manner, to go through that process. And there was probably 90 to 100-minute theatrical production that we did at Heinz Hall here in Pittsburgh, which is a huge hall, and we had about 2,000 people that had showed up for that, and a magnificent set. And it was really kind of, you know, what I learned was what captures the imagination is the set, not the story, the presentation, but it's like the set and the sounds and the music and what images you can project. And I thought that Gene did a wonderful job condensing and all those experiences I had with the main idea that there's no that life is random. You know, things do not happen for a reason. And as he said in it, unless you make yourself the reason that things happen. And so we just talk about those connections within your life that happens, and so we told the story. So that was that experience. So we're we're going to do it again here back in Pittsburgh this coming holiday season. On a longer, it was a one-night show. This is going to be a 14-night show run up here at the Public Theater. So we're very happy with that outcome and the fact that we're going to be able to do it again.
So might we get the opportunity for those of us who aren't in Pittsburgh? Do you vision putting it out on DVD at some point?
Oh, that might be down the line, or you might find it in your region at some theater.
All right.
And so, yeah, that could happen, which is that we are possibly getting a road show together and maybe doing that to the Steeler Nation that is out there and about
Yes.
in the confines of this United States.
All right. Bob, questions for Rocky?
Yeah, welcome back again, Rocky. And, a couple of years ago when we had you on the TV side of things up here, I'll never forget when you were describing to my co-host and I the horror of standing in rice paddies in Vietnam and just the horror around you. And I'm sure you've been asked this hundreds of times, Rocky. Do you ever think how your life might have been different had you not experienced that?
Well, that is a good question, and I think that people ask themselves that question: what would my life be like if I didn't make that choice or that decision, or if this didn't happen to me, or if I didn't go to that school, or if I didn't play that sport, or if I would have done something else, or whatever. And I think that's a legitimate question, and I don't have an answer to it because who knows what would have happened, at that time. And so, it was a part of the experience and the part of the story. But at that time, all these many years ago, that I was in those rice paddies, and you reacted to a situation. You reacted to the best you possibly could, as well as you were prepared to that moment when a machine gun started to level the area, when bodies were falling left and right, and you're stuck in this rice paddy in the middle of nowhere with not a whole lot of protection around you. A lot of things, go through your mind. But what I found is that the majority of people, and I put myself in that category, kind of react. I mean, they react to the situation. They assess the situation. They do what they possibly can, given where they are and what needs to happen. I mean, and I always say this, okay, people, if you have a tendency to panic, you're going to panic in no matter what the situation may be, whether it be in the middle of a race paddy, or whether it be on a street corner with an accident that just had taken place, or if you're behind the wheel of a car, let us just say, and you see a possible collision. I think people underestimate themselves and their ability to react to a situation, and sometimes a horrible situation. And so I found that as a very interesting, because all of a sudden it became very cool and calm, collective in the middle of rice paddy, determining what needed to be done or what would I do if this happened, and trying to prepare for whatever, but in a very almost methodical way. I mean, almost detached from myself, and saying, okay, fine, this is happening. We got this. Okay, you got this weapon. And I thought to myself at one time, I said, okay, I mean, if they're smart enough, they're in front of us. Are they going to try to surround us? Are they going to come? I was on the left flank, our left flank, and they said, so are they going to come up to their right flank? And what if they do? All I was carrying was a grenade launcher. It was like a one-shot shotgun, and I had a scatter round. That was the best that I could do if they was in close combat. So I said, okay, fine. Here's the situation. If they come that side, the only thing I can rely on is this. Hopefully, as a human being, they are as afraid as I am. So if I can get off a quick shot, maybe they'll retreat, which gives me enough time to run out of that rice paddy as fast as I possibly could and get behind some other protection. And so all of a sudden you start thinking about that, in those situations, and you just, you do what you need to do. And I think that, was a saving grace at that time.
And Rocky, you said with all the speaking engagements, and Chris and I are always stressing the importance of talking to young people. And your story obviously would have an effect on anyone, but I see a great need for at least youngsters to be reminded on a constant basis that you can't quit. Is that kind of the message that you send to people, say, under the age of 20 who you speak to on occasion?
Well, I think this, and I think yes. I mean, that's one of the questions. That's one of the things that I talk about is that that sometimes when you want to quit, and but I think the driving. I talk about goals. I talk about a lot of things, but I talk about that I talk about the fact that what our lives really are and what we create and what business that we all are in, no matter what we may do today, is that we're really in the creation of a hope of business. What we do is we create hope, and we do that every day in our presentations and how we see people and what we may say. That the impact that you can make on a person just by saying hi or smiling, it makes a big difference in the world. You can change people's lives because you don't know what's going through in their lives. And so people say, well, I'm really not a leader. I'm more of a follower. I really don't have that charisma to do so. And I say, well, that's not true. I mean, everybody has an impact. So you are a leader because we make an impact. We make an impact positively or negatively by your attitudes, by how you live, by what you say, by how you treat other people. So you do have a responsibility, I really think, and that can make a change in this world, how you change and how you see yourselves. So that's one of them. The other thing is that ability to quit. There are times, as we well know, there are times when we carry the weight of the world on our shoulders and things aren't going well. And, you beat your head against the wall, whether it be about a job or being out of a job or not being able to pay your bills, and all you want to do is escape and you want to quit, and sometimes the grass looks greener on the other side, so you make those choices. And some of those choices are you want to quit. And I had been at that point at one time, where I decided that after 5 credited seasons, and as you said, those 2 earlier seasons, I was on the reserve list for the Steelers, but they still counted towards my retirement. So I got 70. I got 71, 72, 73. And plus the year I was in the service in '68 when I played, all count towards my retirement. But my future, I didn't think was going to go anywhere, from my perspective. And I had left the team after in '73, after the season in '73, not to come back. And until somebody gave me a call, and that was Andy Russell, and we were going to meet for dinner with a bunch of other players, and I didn't want to go because I didn't feel I belonged anymore. And so I just said that I can't come. I'm not going back to the theater. I quit. And in his wisdom, and he said to me very simply, he said, "You can't quit. If you quit, what you've already done is made a decision for that coaching staff. And do you like that coaching staff well enough to make decisions for them? No. Your responsibility, if this is what you want to do, is that you make them make a decision. You give them every reason to either keep you or release you, but you don't cut yourself. Why? Because the reality of this game is that we're all expendable. The reality of this game is that we all can be cut at any time. But if this is what you want, then you don't cut yourself." And that came at a time when maybe just that arm twisting was needed, and I went back. And everything that I perceived took place. And I had to fight with everybody to be able to make the team. And I was I made the team. I was the 5th running back out of 4, and so, and that was the beginning of 74. But things happen. Unbeknownst to me, Franco Harris gets hurt that first game. The backup becomes the starter. I, all of a sudden, become the backup to the backup. Now, that is a position I had never had before. And so with renewed enthusiasm, I played that game, second game, third game, fourth game, right before the half. The backup got hurt. I'm inserted in the game as the only that's left, along with my running mate, a guy by the name of Preston Pearson. Finished his career with Dallas Cowboys, if you may remember. But I tell you this only because Preston broke 143 yards, and he scored, and we went on at halftime. Went over Simon said, who's going to start the second half? I thought to myself, maybe those guys that get you the lead in the first half, and we start the second half. And as a team, we win that game. Everybody's still banged up as a team the following week, and so we get to start again. We win that game. And the week thereafter, it's a Monday night game. Franco now becomes healthy. Damn it, I said to myself. But we had a pregame meal. No, we had a pregame meal, okay? We had a pregame meal. And coach looks around the table and says, okay, Franco, you and Rock are going to start tonight. I have to understand, momentarily, I was quite concerned. I didn't know how we both could play the same position at the same time. When it finally dawned on me, I wasn't going to play the fullback position. I was going to play the other running back position. Nobody told me that. I wish they would have, but we got a chance to play. So we got a chance to start, and we won that game. And we started the remaining part of the season, Brett Phil, Franco, and myself, and we won the division. And we go to the playoffs, and we win the playoffs. We go to the Super Bowl for the first time, and win the Super Bowl. And we play 6 more years together, and we win 3 more Super Bowls. In 76, Franco and I become the second set of running backs in the history of the NFL, each to gain 1,000 yards rushing in one season.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that I tell that is that if I would have quit, I'd have never had the chance to be able to play those 12 years or have all those memories or win those Super Bowls. If I would have quit. The reason I get a chance to play, and here's the kicker, isn't because of my size and speed, 2 things I don't possess, but one talent. And I tell people this, is that we all have a talent. We all have talent of one nature or another. And it's really our responsibility to be able to find and develop what that talent is, different than anybody else, different than Chris's, different than yours, Bob. But we all have a talent. And so the reason I tell them is that because all those many years ago prior to that breakout group, Buck Knowles, their backfield coach, you have a weakness in your backfield. Who is your best blocker? He said, Bleier. He said, then start him. One talent. And all of a sudden, as I tell people, it's that fine line of one that connects all of our lives. That fine line of one that allows us to be where we are today. For if it wasn't for that one talent, I might not have gotten that chance or that opportunity. But then I got to thinking, well, if it wasn't for that one injury, I might not have got a chance to play. Or Preston's one touchdown, we may never have gone back in that second half. Or if it wasn't for that one phone call from Andy Russell, I might never have gone back. And actually, it all goes back to a triple amputee, to a postcard I got from Art Rooney, which I think I shared that story with you over the years.
Right.
And that you created the hope within one's life to say, team's not doing well, we need you. And I think all those little things add up to where we become today. So that's the kind of the message that I tell people today or young kids today, is that no matter where you are within school, how things may seem or how bad that things may seem, is that you never give up your dream of what you want to become, be able to set the goals that you have, and work through the tough periods and create that hope that you can achieve what you want to achieve.
What a great message that is, Rock. Before we let you go, you've got a great website, rockybleier.com. Tell our listeners what they can find when they go on there and check out your site.
What they can find on Rocky Bleier. There's some things about my speaking engagements. We got a film on there about the play. It was done by NFL Films. And so it's a great 8-minute piece we have other informations on where I'm going to be and what's going to happen. So it's a pretty awesome site. They've done a good job with it.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. Rocky, we can't thank you enough for taking time out of your night to come back and be a part of the show. You know how much we love talking to you. I hope you'll come back and do it again sometime soon.
Anytime.
You're so great.
As Tony said, you got my number. Just give me a call.
All right.
We will.
Rocky, take care. Thanks again for being here. You're fantastic. We look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Hey, guys, I got to share this with you. Please.
Are you still with us, Rock? We might have lost Rock. Yeah, I think we lost Rock. If you're listening, we lost you on the cell. So we look forward to helping. There you're back. Now you're back with us. Finish your thoughts,
back on the show. Okay, fine. Here's okay, fine. Here it is. It's fitting that the Steelers' last Super Bowl team of the decade, back in '79, is the one to hold this unique place in football history. And the 1979 Pittsburgh Steelers is the only Super Bowl champion where each member of the team was drafted by the organization. Every member of the '79 Steelers was drafted by Coach Chuck Noll and the Rooneys.
Wow.
So there.
Yeah, no, that's a great stat.
Yeah, so it might be a little trivia question for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that, Rock. We appreciate it very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care, Rocky. We'll catch up soon.
Thanks. All right, bye-bye.
That is Steelers legend Rocky Bleier, and I tell you, there's not a better storyteller on the planet, Bob. And boy, it's always such a great time getting to spend some time with Rocky.
Oh, of course, Chris, and of course, as far as motivation and don't quit, and man, the three guys we've just spoken with are at the top of the list. If anybody needs to have someone speak to groups, but again, I remember talking to Rocky about it, and he was very emotional that night about his time in the rice paddies with bullets flying and his life going past his. Just thinking about it, it was incredible, and to hear it every time I get chills. But he uses it in such a positive way, and that's why I asked him. It probably helped him for the way he went about his business after football and et cetera. And what he continues to do today is inspire people and help people, and just a great man and a great story, and that's why he's in our Hall of Fame.
Indeed, it is. All right, before we get to our next guest, Keith Millard, who's hanging on the line, I want to give a shout-out to our good friend Renee Shaw at Integrated Play. Folks, you hear us talking about Renee every single week here on Thursday Night Tailgate. But if you're either already in job transition or you've been thinking to yourself, boy, I wish I were in job transition, go to integratedplay.org online to see how Renee can help you. We all want to do business and take advice from someone that we can trust who actually has our best interests at heart, and that's very rare. You're not going to find someone who fits that description any better than Renee Shaw at Integrated Play. She is smart, she is talented, and the kind of person you want to work with and have working for you. She's done some great things from some of our guests who have been in transition from being pro athletes and are now getting in the job market. Folks, I'm telling you, she is just the very best. There isn't a better way to describe Renee than that. If you work with her for 2 minutes, you're going to understand why we say that every single week here on Thursday Night Tailgate. If you're an athlete or anyone in the job market, do yourself a favor and reach out to Renee. You're going to be very glad you did. Go to integratedplay.org online and give her a follow on Twitter at integratedplay. All right, now joining us on the Kyvan Foods guest line is Keith Millard. Let me give you some background on Keith. He's from Pleasanton, California. Played his college ball at Washington State, where he was a Pac-10 defensive lineman, Pac-10's top defensive lineman as a senior. In 1983, he won the Pac-10 Morris Award, which is awarded annually to the Pac-10's outstanding offensive or defensive lineman. And last year, he was inducted into the Cougars Hall of Fame. He was a first-round draft pick, the 13th overall selection by the Minnesota Vikings in 1984, but chose to play in the USFL for one season, which we'll talk about here in a moment. He played in the NFL from 1985 to 1993 for the Vikings, Seahawks, Packers, and Eagles. Was a two-time Pro Bowl selection in back-to-back years in 1988 and 89. In 89, he was the NFL Defensive Player of the Year when he had 18 sacks. Over the course of his career, he had 70 sacks, including 12 with the Jacksonville Bulls in the USFL, Those 70 sacks came in only 111 games, so really almost a 1-to-1 ratio for him. After retiring as a player, he coached for the Broncos, Raiders, Bucks, and is currently a defensive assistant for the Tennessee Titans. In 2010, he was named one of the top 50 Vikings of all time, and we are very honored to have him with us tonight on Thursday Night Tailgate. Hey, Keith, Chris, and Bob here. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Keith.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
So, Keith, let's start out kind of going all the way back to the beginning. I'm curious, as a kid growing up just outside of San Francisco, were you a 49ers fan?
No, never. I'm closer to the Oakland Raiders. Pleasanton's like 25 miles east of Oakland. So, and we had a lot of them that kind of lived around our neighborhood and went to school with some of the players' kids. So
wow.
Now my relatives were all 49er fans because they're from San Francisco. My mother's from San Francisco and her brother and sister's from there. So they were all 49er fans. But I was a Raider fan growing up.
So, Keith, as you know, being from that part, of California, how in the world did USC and UCLA, Cal, Stanford, how did all those guys let you get away to go play your college ball up at Washington State?
I didn't play football till my junior year. I was a soccer player from second grade until really through my sophomore year of high school. So I didn't even really play the sport. I always loved the sport. And always kind of wanted to play it, but my mother wouldn't let me play when I was younger, so I kind of put it in the back of my mind. And then a good friend of mine, a guy named Rich Moran, who played for the Packers and played at San Diego State, we went to high school together. He showed up at my door one day. He's from an NFL family. His dad played. His brother went to University of Washington and ended up playing in the NFL. So big football family. So for him to come to my door, it kind of surprised me, but he talked me into playing and going out for the team. And, in those days I was a little bit of a rebel. I was a soccer player, so I knew the coaches weren't going to like me. And I told him that, and he said, don't worry about it. One of those, it's not where you start, it's where you finish speeches. So I gave it a go and played tight end. I was probably 8th team when I started out my junior year, my first year playing. And worked up the ladder. I've always had good hands. I could catch, and did pretty well that year. So I started getting recruited, not by SC, that's for sure, but BYU, Cal a little bit, San Diego State, Colorado, schools like that. Washington State didn't recruit me. They were recruiting Moran. They happened by me by accident, but so anyway, my senior year, we got a new head coach. The guy that basically got all the recruiters to come out left for a college job right before our season started, my senior year. His name was John Bochester. He's a great coach. I was really looking forward to playing for him as a head coach. In fact, he just got the head coach. He was moved up from an assistant to be our head coach at Foothill High. And right before the season started, he left to take a college job. So we were left without a coach. So they ended up using the girls volleyball coach to be our head football coach. And needless to say, there was a lot of problems. My senior year, I only played 4 games. I got kicked off the team. So it was kind of a rough year, but I ended up playing in the All-Star game, did pretty well. And then Washington State came out to look at Rich, and one of my teachers pulled the recruiter aside and said, you got to look at this kid, Keith Millard. Don't believe all the things you hear about him. I've had a little bit of adversity in my life in those days and wasn't even living at home at the time. So this recruiter took a chance on me, and Jim Walden, who was the head coach at Washington State, came out and visited me, and they offered me a scholarship, and that's basically how it went. So the same guy, Rich Moran, that got me involved with football, also because he was being recruited by Washington State, I got lucky, and they ended up recruiting me from that point on. It was late in the year, too, now. It was right before the letter of intent, which was in February, and ended up signing a scholarship and played my freshman year at tight end. We ran the option, so we didn't throw much. So they moved me to defense my sophomore year.
So,
that's
Keith,
it
when I was What's that?
I said that's it in a nutshell.
All right.
So not a lot. Go ahead.
When I was sort of looking back over, the records, the Washington State had during your time there, 1982 wasn't necessarily the team's best year. You guys went 3-7-1, but the last game of the season, you guys got a big W against number 5 ranked Washington. They had won 9 games in a row in that rivalry against you guys. They the win makes that's the highest ranked team that Washington State has ever beaten. Talk about, the opportunity to go in there, because they had beaten you guys the year before, which may have prevented you guys from going to the Rose Bowl. And here you are, big underdogs the next year, and you're able to return the favor. How big was that win for you guys?
It was huge. And any time that we played UW, which we didn't even call them UW, we just called them the Dogs. That's all we ever called them. We were a huge rivalry in those days. Jim Walden and Coach James in those days, they must have hated each other, because any time that we played those guys, it was life or death. And my class, the class of 80, we played their class of 80 in a freshman game. We went down there and played them in a freshman game and beat them in that freshman game. And because of all their Rose Bowls and all the hype that they got, and University of Washington, all the great players that they put in the NFL, they were the big dogs on the street, so we were always the underdog. But our freshman class beat them, and then my junior year was the same freshman class that played the same freshman class that they were, back in 1980, but now we're juniors. So we knew the players, we knew who we were playing, and we had a pretty good class in 1980. And so we just went out there. We played in Pullman. It was snowing, and even though we lost most of our games that year, we actually tied Oregon State that year, who I don't know if they won any games. So we were definitely a young team trying to find our way, but we were not going to let those guys off the hook. And then my senior year, we beat them as well. We knocked them out of the Rose Bowl 2 years in a row.
Bob, questions for Keith?
Hi, Keith. And every time we speak with first-round draft picks, Chris knows I love to get the guests' ideas about that draft day. And that 84 draft, Keith, there was some great defensive players, players in general. I just remember guys like Wilbur Marshall and Ricky Hunley, Carl Banks, Bill Moss. It was a very good class. What were you being told the day of the draft or the week up? Did you have any idea, excuse me, that it would be a first-round pick? And as far as would it be Minnesota?
Yeah, no, I had no idea it was going to be Minnesota. I was told before the combine that I would go probably in the top 7, but I didn't go to the combine because I had a hurt shoulder. I hurt it in the Senior Bowl. In those days, the combine was just kind of getting started. It was a big deal. You needed to be there, but they actually had 2 of them. They had one in Seattle, and then they had the national one. I didn't go to the national one. So it kind of dropped my status. I knew I was going to go in the first round, and to me, coming where I came from, just getting drafted was huge enough for me. So I really wasn't worried about it. I didn't want them to know about my shoulder because I was still rehabbing it, trying to get back. I wouldn't have been able to bench at the combine, and, I always took pride in those things. I was always in great physical shape. I worked hard, and I just didn't want to go in there and lay an egg to bench. I was already only 249 pounds, so I was kind of light. I didn't want to – I've always been strong for my size, so I really didn't want to go in there and lay an egg in that department. So I told them I had to take a bunch of finals, this, that, whatever, and I couldn't make it. But I actually think it dropped my status. So I thought it was either going to be Green Bay, Buffalo. Actually, those were the 2 teams that I thought the whole time – coming up to the draft, I heard it was going to be the Rams. That's what was being told to me. And then I missed the combine, and that didn't happen. So when Minnesota called me, I had no idea. It was a total surprise because Green Bay called me, but they didn't draft me. They drafted Alfonso Carrecker. Buffalo called, but I think they actually ended up drafting after us, but they did call. And then all of a sudden Minnesota called, and Les Steckel was the head coach at the time, and they drafted me. It was awesome. It was the greatest feeling of my life at that point.
And I noticed, Keith, one of the notable assistant coaches on those Viking teams when you played was Pete Carroll. And I was just wondering, did he have the same enthusiasm back then? Did you think he'd go on to what he's accomplished both at the college and pro levels?
You know, Monty Kiffin was there too. We had a really good coaching staff. My D-line coach, Paul Wiggin, has actually been a head coach in the NFL with the Kansas City Chiefs. Yeah. Floyd Peters has been a great defensive coach everywhere he's been, Detroit, St. Louis, and then Minnesota when he came to us. And Pete Carroll was our secondary coach. So we had a really good coaching staff. Now, as players, you don't realize that at the time because, you know, they're just coaches, right? So you don't really think about it. But later on in life, when you get into coaching like I did, you start to realize how good they were. The one thing I remember about Pete is he was always enthusiastic. He's very smart. Everybody on the team knew it. He and Monty were a huge part of our success. You know, Floyd Peters was our defensive coordinator, probably got a lot of the credit. But, you know, talking to guys like Scott Studwell and some of the older guys on our team, they attributed a lot of our success to Pete Carroll and Monty Kiffin.
And Keith, you were drafted 13th overall by the Vikings, but you went to play 1 year in the USFL instead. Why?
It was the hardest thing I ever had to do because Minnesota at the time was the winningest team, but they had the lowest salaries in the league, and what they were offering me was so much lower than some of the guys that got drafted around me, but even guys that were drafted way below me, like Ron Farrow and some of these other guys, and it was, I don't know, it was more of a pride thing. It was kind of an insult thing. I mean, the money was really, really low. It was bad. And when Jacksonville, I actually got drafted the first defensive player by the Arizona Wranglers of the USFL when George Allen was the head coach, and John Turlink was actually the D-line coach. And they brought me out there for a little trip, and they almost had me signed on the spot. But I wanted to weigh my options, and while I was weighing my options, they traded my rights to Jacksonville Bulls, and they basically gave me a king's ransom. I couldn't pass it up. You know, your career in this game is short, and I needed to get what I could. You know, just to take care of my future or whatever. So I went for the money. I wasn't happy about it. I did not want to play in the USFL. My dream was always to play in the NFL. But I had a good time in the USFL. There's a lot of great players that played in that league. It was a legitimate league. Absolutely. If you think about all the players that came out of there. But I really wanted to play in the NFL. So when that USFL season ended, we played 18 games in those days, plus 6 weeks of training camp. I only had a month between the USFL and training camp with the Minnesota because when the league folded, I had to go right to Minnesota, and I only had, like I said, a month, 6 weeks from the time I finished that 18-week season, 18-game season to training camp in Minnesota. So it was a tough go. Lucky I was young.
And Keith, to your point, I was sort of looking over the roster of the Jacksonville Bulls, and you had players. You had Brian Sipe was on that team, Mike Rozier was on that team, Archie Griffin kind of finished out his playing career there. Vaughn Johnson was on that defense. Talk about the opportunity to get to play with those guys.
It was awesome. Vaughn Johnson was a great guy to play for. He was our leader. He was our Mike Backer. He made all the calls on defense. He basically ran our defense. Very smart, no nonsense type of guy. He got us to play above our ability for sure with his intensity and passion for the game. So he was really cool to play with. Lindy Infante was our head coach. Greg Blosh was my D-line coach. I don't know if you ever heard that name. He's been a defensive coordinator in the NFL for years. He's retired now, had a lot of success. But there's some good coaches on that staff as well as the whole league on every staff, a lot of good coaches. But the experience was awesome. It really was. It really felt like big-time football to me, and I think that's what got me through. And then, you look at the other teams that you're playing. You got Herschel Walker, you got Reggie White, you got all these different players that are playing. So it made you feel a little bit better about doing it. But my heart was really, in playing in the NFL. And, I didn't miss much. Minnesota only went 3-13 that year, and poor Les got fired. Bud Grant came back, and when he came back, he called me and said, we need you back here. You need to get back here, whatever it takes. Let's get it done. But I want to see you here in 2 weeks. And when he said that, I know he meant it. So I was definitely there in 2 weeks. That's the first and last time he ever talked to me. He did not talk to rookies. He didn't even like them. Bud Grant was weird about that. He was a veteran coach. He was all about veterans. He didn't even want to deal with the rookies. I only started 5 games my rookie year and had 11 sacks.
Bob, one more for Keith before we let him go.
Yeah, Keith. And that 89 season, I remember, because that was the year of the sack. It was just crazy with Strahan up here in New York. And you had 18 yourself. Your team is very successful. You did get beat badly by San Francisco. But that 88-89 seasons, when you're elected to the Pro Bowl, that means you're among the best of the best, among your peers and everything. That probably is one of the biggest honors and things you've been able to hang your head on over the years, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was a great year for all of us. Our whole defense played really well that year. We struggled a little bit on offense. Tommy Kramer got hurt, so we were back and forth with different quarterbacks. We didn't finish out the way we should have, but it was a lot of fun. We had a lot of very, very good players on that team, got some Hall of Famers on that team, on that D-line, Chris Dolman, Henry Thomas, Al Noga, Doug Martin. We had Joey Browner, Scott Studwell. The list goes on. Carl Lee. It was a great defense, and we were a tight-knit group that played hard, loved playing with each other. We hung out with each other. It was a great experience for me. It was an awesome team to play for, and it was a really good group of guys to fight with.
And Keith, now you're a defensive assistant with the Tennessee Titans. As a guy who's a big Steelers fan, you've got a guy that's near and dear to my heart there, and Dick LeBeau. Talk about working with Coach LeBeau and the Titans defense.
Actually, I'm not with the Titans anymore. I haven't been with them for 2 years now. I had to get out. I've been away from my family. I'm having a lot of physical problems. I've been away from my family for like 3 years, so I've actually been out for 2 years. But I know Dick LeBeau, and he's a great coach. I would have loved to work with that guy. I would have loved to play for him. He's that kind of guy. He's a player's coach. I think he's going to do a great job there. A lot of the same players were there when I was there. My last year was 2014 when they got the new coaching staff. They basically let us all go, and I just came back to California and haven't gone back since. So, but yeah, it was a great place to coach. Mike Munchak was our head coach at the time. Jerry Gray was our defensive coordinator, and we were doing some good things. Jake Locker got hurt, and our season fell apart. And you know how that what happens when that happens. So we're all basically in the unemployment line. But great experience. I loved that. I loved coaching the NFL. I miss it a lot. But it's just too hard on my body right now to do it.
Keith, let our listeners know how can they stay up to date with the things that you're doing, whether it's online or over social media. I'm on Twitter all the time at Keith Millard 75. I've got a website. I do a lot of camps. In fact, I'm working on a camp right now with Jesse Sapolo and Guy McIntyre. It's an 8-week O-line, D-line camp. It's called Men in the Trenches. I'm actually working on that. We start this Saturday. I got a website, keith@coachmillard.com. I do a lot of stuff with the combine kids, just low maintenance type stuff. Just working with guys that are getting ready to go in the NFL. Sometimes I'll get guys coming back from the NFL that'll come out and we'll do some work. But really just spending time with my family and enjoying life. Good for you, Keith. Keith, thank you so much for taking time, being patient with us tonight, and then taking time to be a part of the show. It was great having you on. I hope you'll come back and join us again sometime. So many questions we'd love to get your feedback on from your days, as a player in the league and then as a coach as well. But you're fantastic. We can't thank you enough for being here.
Thanks for having me, guys. Anytime.
Thanks, Keith.
Appreciate that very much,
Take
Keith.
care.
All the best to you and your
All
family.
right.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Good night.
That is former Vikings Pro Bowl defensive tackle Keith Millard. And, Bob, it's interesting he talks about Bud Grant, because that was one of the many questions I had to ask him. What was it like playing for Bud Grant? And interesting that, we've heard, guys, head coaches from that era, right? The Bud Grants and the Chuck Knowles, from the, guys from the 70s, very stoic head coaches. And we've heard about, guys like that, and particularly Bud Grant was a guy who, and we talked, to Doug Cosby about, Tom Landry. Tom Landry, he said, didn't say 10 words to him during his whole time playing for Coach Landry. So It's interesting how standoffish, if you will, that the head coaches of that era were.
Yeah, that's the greatness of talking to guys like Keith, and what we do with these guys is to get their inside as far as what really has happened and what these coaches are really like. We've heard so many things about guys like Belichick that we didn't know, but it's great to talk with guys like Keith, who goes underrated, under the radar as far as his greatness himself, Chris. That 18 sacks, we have to remember, this was not a guy that was lining up like a Lawrence Taylor or whatever. This guy was on a nose tackle or a DT coming at you from the middle of the line, and getting 18 sacks like that is just amazing.
Yeah, it is. That's a very good point, Bob. All right, when we come back here on Thursday Night Tailgate, we're going to turn on the spotlight on the positive. So hang with us. We'll get back to that on the other side of this word from our friends over at Coastal Orthopedics and the French Lick Resort.
Are you suffering from chronic pain in your shoulders, hips, knees, or wrists? Tired of living life with an old injury that just won't go away? If you answered yes to either of these questions, we can help. At Coastal Orthopedics and Sports Medicine, Dr. Candelora and his fine staff of medical professionals will get you back on the road to recovery. Their state-of-the-art facility and attention to detail will ensure you will be enjoying life again and feeling invincible in no time. Since 1991, Dr. Candelora and Coastal Orthopedics have been specializing in joint replacement, arthritis, and osteoporosis care, as well as pediatric and adult general orthopedics. Visit us on the web, www.bone-dr.com, or call our Newport Richey office just north of Tampa at 727-848-1417. Proud sponsors of Mike Ditka's The Gridiron Greats Assistance Fund.
Now's the time to plan that golf getaway you've been dreaming about at French Lick Resort. We have new Golf Academy packages for 2016, guaranteed to take your game to the next level. Try our one-day Quick Fix Academy for golf emergencies. For more in-depth learning, try the Game Changer, designed to make you a better player. Our staff professionals are ready to work with you at French Lick Resort. Did you know there's only one place in the country that you can play courses designed by two members of the World Golf Hall of Fame on the same property? The Pete Dye and Donald Ross courses at French Lick Resort make us an ultimate golf destination for 2016. Check out the Ultimate Golf Package, the Hall of Fame Package, and other great offerings at FrenchLick.com. Let 2016 be that year you finally take your dream golf getaway at French Lick Resort. Play the courses champions play.
Hey, welcome back. This is Todd Washington, two-time Super Bowl champ, offensive line coach for the Baltimore Ravens, and you are listening to Thursday Night Tailgate with my boys Chris-Mascaro and Bob-Lazzari on the Armed Forces Radio Network. Go get them, guys.
And we're back on Thursday Night Tailgate, turning on our spotlight on the positive. Bob, who do you got for us this week?
Well, we brought up the town of Jacksonville, Chris, and I was reading today about their offensive guard, the Jaguars, Zane Beadles. Now, there's a great name. That's got to be the best name in the NFL, Zane Beadles. Right, Chris? But reading his story was incredible. You know, he played at Utah, and he met a kid that had a brain tumor, a 7-year-old kid, and really befriended the kid and was going to invite him on the field when football season started while he was still at Utah. Unfortunately, and the kid wanted to be a football player, and the kid passed away, Chris, at the age of 7 before we ever made it to that. And Zane never forgot that. And when he got to the pros, he made it it was just on his mind that this kid would never be forgotten. So he set up the Zane Beadles Parade Foundation, which is all geared at kids that have similar problems at a very young age. For patients and their families, he gets them to sporting events. He sets up meals with players, trips to the zoos, you name it. That's part one of what he does. Part two of what he's doing now, he is setting up actual housing, which they call safe, clean housing, where you can't really have many germs. When kids are going through things like this, Chris, they have to be really safe. He's trying to come up with affordable things where people could stay up to 500 days at no cost to them in certain cities. Wow. He's done it in Florida and Utah, and it's amazing. They just and he just wants to make their existence as great as possible while they're fighting through adversity. But, it'll make you cry if you read about him. But I urge people to check out what Zane Beadles is doing. Again, he plays guard for the Jaguars.
That's great stuff, Bob. And this week I want to put the spotlight on the positive on Buffalo Bills center Eric Wood. Eric has been a strong advocate for NFL Play 60, for breast cancer awareness, salute to service, and overall community health and wellness programs in the city of Buffalo. He has actively participated in the Play 60 events, including the Bills Play 60 fitness party and doing several Play 60 school visits as well. Each October, Eric has played a key role in the Bills' annual Believe event to promote breast cancer awareness and to assist in promotional efforts to support that cause as well. In addition, the Bills organization counts on Eric for a number of other events, including community group visits during training camp, Thanksgiving food drives with the Food Bank of Western New York, and participating in the Bills holiday party for children as well. So Eric has helped launch the Offensive Line Holiday Party, which provides an evening of dinner and shopping for 30 teenage boys from the United Way of Buffalo and the Erie County Boys and Girls Club. So great stuff that he's been doing there. Plus, in 2014, he launched the Eric Wood Foundation, which has a very personal mission to he and his family. The goal of that foundation is to provide seriously ill and special needs and physically challenged children throughout the greater Buffalo area with the daily encouragement and life-changing experiences to help those folks. Eric has, hosted a number of local events to help raise funds, which is, heavily supported by several members of the Buffalo Bills organization as well. He is a community and a family man at heart and has been a player that the Bills have really relied on to be a key community figure and a positive role model for all Buffalo Bills fans. So kudos to Eric for what he has done to become, what a wonderful positive influence to his teammates, to kids, to the whole, Buffalo community as well. So I want to make sure I shined the spotlight on the positive on Eric tonight. So kudos to Eric Wood for all the great things that he is doing. So between, what Bob is sharing and what I'm sharing here, these are some of the stories, folks, that we want to make sure that you are hearing. Like we say a lot here on Thursday Night Tailgate, you can't get away from the negative stuff. You can, whatever football website or sports website you go to, you're going to find a headline about it. You turn on ESPN News or Headline News, and you're going to not only hear the story about it, you're going to read the ticker going across the bottom of the screen. What you're not going to hear are all the great things that, guys like we're talking about tonight, and we try to, shine the spotlight on every single week here on Thursday Night Tailgate. So many guys are doing great things in communities across the country, and those are the stories that we want to make sure that you're hearing. So, again, kudos to Eric Wood and the great things that he is doing. Bob, thank you for sharing your story with us as well. So great stuff.
Me too.
All right, folks, it is time for us to put a bow on this episode. Our thanks to Beau Bock, Tim Worley, Tony Mandarich, Rocky Bleier, and Keith Millard for joining us tonight. And Bob, is, as I say every single week, but I mean it from the heart, my friend, one of the greatest privileges of all is to get to spend my Thursday nights with you.
I appreciate it, and the feeling is mutual, Chris, and what an inspirational evening. You couldn't book a better group of guys than that. Thank you so much.
Oh, no, what you're exactly right. What a great group of guys. What great stories they all had to share. So next week, folks, who do we have on tap for you? Well, come back and join us because Cleveland Browns Pro Bowl tight end Gary Barnidge is going to join us. Our friend and former Packers All-Pro kicker Chris Jackie is going to be back on the show. Former Packers and Broncos quarterback Don Horn is going to be making his TNT debut with us. Plus, Tony Collins will be back from the Bahamas and in his regular time slot. So we look forward to catching back up with Tony and hear how that little mini vacation was for him. Plus, we'll get an update on what's going on over with Major League Football. So Nick Athen will be back, and he'll join us and give us all the details for what their plans are. So it's going to be another really great show. We hope you'll come back and be a part of it with us. How can you follow us on social media? Well, Thursday Night Tailgate's we've got a Facebook page, and we'd love for you to interact with us there. Give us a like. That's important to us as well. You can find both Bob and I on Facebook. We have pages there. You can interact with us on there as well individually. On Twitter, I am at CT-mascaro. Bob is at Bob_Lazzari. You can find the show at TNT Podcast. So please interact with us. We'd love to hear from you. Plus, check out the Thursday Night Tailgate, our website, ThursdayNightTailgate.com. On there, you can stay up to date with who some of our future guests are going to be, and you can stream or download any of our archive episodes for free, folks, by going on the site. Again, ThursdayNightTailgate.com. Bob, take us home, my friend.
And, Chris, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Tony Collins is having fun in the Bahamas. What do you think? He has fun everywhere he goes. And but right. Thanks, of course, to our announcer, Joe LaGenusa. He does such a great job with our weekly intro and ads. And to James Brocato and all the guys from Painted Faces for our upcoming outro music. On behalf of myself and Chris, we thank everyone tonight for listening. We appreciate you all the most. Until next week, good night, Kevin. We miss you.